And then the other thing that just it never ceases to amaze me about the books is the range of ages and types of people that they speak to. I mean,
Hmm.
I'll get a fan letter from an 8-year-old Amish girl in Ohio, and she's loving this book. And then honestly, they go into federal prisons, and we will get another letter from about the same book from somebody who's on death row. And it's
Right.
like, it it's doesn't really compute. I mean, how does this work that an 8-year-old sheltered Amish girl and a dude who's murdered somebody or something,
Hmm.
that they are writing and saying the same thing about the same book?
From the Florida Parent Educators Association, home of the largest homeschool convention in America, this is the Not by the Book podcast. I'm your host, FPEA Chairman Suzanne Nunn, and together we will hear from guests who share their journey to who and where they are today. Each one of them at some point left the expected path, ripped the page out of the book that says, you have to do it like this, and made their own way. I hope these conversations inspire you as much as they do me. On this episode of Not by the Book, I have a great conversation with Janet Benge, who has authored the series Christian Heroes Then and Now and Heroes of History, along with her husband, Geoff. You are going to enjoy hearing all about how Janet became part of YWAM and became the author of these fabulous stories. Listen with me now. What was it like to be Janet as a little girl?
Well, I would say it started off pretty happy and
Good.
pretty optimistic. I think that as a young child, I was very optimistic about my abilities, and I had a lot of positive reinforcement.
Mm.
And I had some early wins, which were kind of a little surprising. I was thinking about it this morning, and I was thinking one thing when I was 5 years old, my first year at school, and we were doing math, and the teacher wrote 4 or 5 math problems on the board, 3 plus 2, 1 plus 1, that
Mm.
sort of thing. There was just a few of them. And she said, I've put a trick one in there. So we were all supposed to be doing these sums. And I came to this one, which I think was 3 minus 5.
Mm.
And I thought, okay, well, this is the trick. Let's solve this one. So I came up with the idea that you must be able to go below 1. And so I kind of had this idea of a ladder, and I was like, I'm climbing down the ladder. You can climb, if you don't set the bottom rung as the bottom of the ladder, you can climb down below it. And so I think I wrote B for backwards in front of it, and then I climbed down and I wrote 2. So my answer was B2. And I remember the teacher coming and standing over me, and she put a big X through it. And she said, the trick was it can't be done. And
Ah.
I was like, so I went home and told my dad, I'm like, Dad, I think I've invented something new here. My teacher says you can't do backwards numbers, but I think you can. And I showed my dad what I had invented, and he told me, oh, your teacher just doesn't know what she's talking about. That these are called negative numbers, and you don't use a B, you use a minus. And so my parents could have presumed that they had a smart little girl on their hands, and I think they were very enthusiastic. But by the time I was 8 or 9, there were some big cracks starting to show, and from then, I would describe my learning and my school experience as very uneven. That's probably the word all of my learning throughout my life is uneven. And,
Yeah.
I found there are people who can, work with that, and people who don't have the imagination to work with
Mm.
somebody who is not a typical thinker. And
Yeah.
I've encountered both. So,
Well, that's true though. I think that it's completely accurate especially when you're in a school system with multiple students. I think that it's hard sometimes for every teacher to have those same abilities, and it's hard because you have kids who do fall through the cracks, because somebody
Mhm.
can't serve what their needs are or to understand them. So that's unfortunate. So I think that it's interesting though, because what I find is that those parts of our story sometimes really build our strength and our other
Mhm.
abilities because we lean into what we're strong at.
Right.
Can you tell me a little bit about your family? Like, where did you live and grow up, and did you have siblings? Were you an only child?
I grew up in Hamilton, New Zealand, which is the fourth largest city. I grew up in a
Mm.
new suburb called Hillcrest, and I had two older brothers and one younger brother, so I was the only girl. My mother got married and had four of us in her first 5 years of marriage. Yeah,
She
that's
was
all under
brave.
5. She was drowning, really, I think,
Yeah,
pretty much as she said it changed her life, which
I'm sure it did.
absolutely not, certainly did. So I had 4 brothers, and we were each 18 months apart, and
Mm.
then when I was 14, my mother had another child. I think she was 39 at the time, and it was
Wow.
another boy. I felt for sure it was my sister coming along, but it was another boy, and so I grew up with 3 brothers, but I have 4 brothers.
That's amazing. And you grew up in New Zealand. What was unique to the way that you would have spent time during your childhood for you? Were you involved in a lot of activities or hobbies, or were you pretty much
Um, Not really. I think that New Zealand had a unique education system. And when I was growing up and when I became a teacher, we were top in the world for literacy.
mm,
And I think because, unlike the US system, it was individualized and
mm,
I was allowed to learn at my own level. For instance, spelling. I since found out I was dyslexic. So, spelling, I was allowed to be at my own level. We had a system which actually I introduced to some public schools here in Orange County, which is about each kid being at their own level. So
mm,
our teachers were encouraged, and we did have individual instruction. Our reading groups were no more than 4 or 5 kids in a group. And, so it wasn't that so much. But as far as we were outside a lot. And my mother never drove a car. I do not believe my father. I know for a fact my father never took me or collected me from school once. We had a
mm.
bicycle and we had our feet. And
Yeah.
I remember we lived on the corner of a park. And if you walked diagonally across this park, which was probably, I don't know, 8 football fields, it was a big park. On the other side, there was a little alleyway that led down the road to my elementary school. And, I remember sometimes walking that in thick, thick fog where
Mm.
you would get into the middle of the park and you couldn't see anything. I was like Narnia. And it was like,
Oh,
oh
wow.
my gosh. I was like 8 years old and I was on
Mhm.
my own. And I just thought it was the biggest adventure ever to get lost in the fog and then have to figure out which direction to head in. And you couldn't hear anything because it's, the fog dampens sound. And yeah, then after school, I just tell mom I'm going to play at so and so's house and, be back at 5:30 or whatever. So she
Mhm.
basically waved me out the door at 8 and may not see me till 5 and I'd be on my own steam, which everybody was. So
Right.
yeah, it was a very different time. I was not sporty. My brothers were very good sportsmen and I was
Mhm.
awful at sports. And so my 2 brothers would be on one team, and my oldest brother, who was a particularly good sportsman, would be on the other team with me, and I was his handicap. And he would always tell me, "Just don't go near the ball, don't touch anything. I'll do it and we'll win." Because he was very competitive, and sure enough, as long as I didn't attempt in any way to interfere, he would play 2 against 1, and he would win for us. But it did leave me with a lifelong dread of any kind of team sport.
That's awesome. Brothers can be that way, I'll tell you.
They can. They're brutal.
They're brutal. So, fast forward a little bit and tell me about what your plans or thoughts were about your future when you were in high school and starting to think about finishing school. What were your plans for what was going to be next?
Well, I always loved books, always. Even though I had trouble reading, I always read. And I developed little systems in my mind to get around things that I couldn't read. For instance, I could read and still can read an entire book and not pronounce some of the words in it, like the words
Mhm.
of places and people are just shapes to me. And as long as I keep that, I can keep that shape in my head, and then I'll talk to someone. They'll say, "Oh, what did you think of, Serafina?" And I'll be like, "Lordy,
Who?
who's Serafina?" Like, she's the protagonist. I'm like, okay. So I think I learned a lot of kind of hiding mechanisms to disguise the things that I was not able to do. I would say by the middle of high school, I was on two tracks myself. I mean,
Mhm.
as a person, I was on two tracks. I was running into brick walls, and I also was diagnosed, had a late diagnosis at about 50 of ADHD. And I think I was suffering just from chronic overwhelm. And at the end of my fifth form year, which would be like, oh, 16,
Mhm.
I really crashed and I couldn't even go back to my school. But when I thought I probably I'd be a teacher because I've always loved to be around little children. I
Mhm.
just find them hilarious. I just like I particularly love like second to fourth graders. I just the way that they'll just let you into their little worldview is just it just intrigues me. I find it absolutely fascinating. I have
Yeah.
an 8-year-old grandson at the moment. Oh my gosh, he just gives me stitches. So I did think, and my father was a teacher. So my mother never worked once she got married. Neither of my grandmothers worked. There wasn't a high expectation around me of a woman having a career,
Mhm.
and I did feel that my dad would come home very frustrated and he would kind of yell at us kids, be quiet. I've been with kids all day. I need some peace at home. And I really took that on board and I thought I will never teach and be a mom and do that to my own children. So
Mm.
it was never going to be kind of a long-term thing anyway. But I did think I would probably be a teacher. I did not for a moment imagine I would be a writer.
Yeah.
I didn't know anyone who had anything to do with writing. You might as well have thought I could be an astronaut. I mean, it just was like
So
totally
far.
beyond, totally beyond anything I could even have conjured up to imagine.
That's
So,
amazing. So
mm.
so you did finish school. Did you go directly to a secondary education, college education? And
Yes, well, New Zealand had a different system. We don't.
okay.
America has 4 years and you graduate. We have more
Mhm.
the English system where there's like 3 exit points depending on what you want to do next. The first
Okay.
one is on your 15th birthday. You can leave school, or you could back then. I think they might have upped it to 16, I'm not sure. So if you're going into a trade or you're just a pain in the neck to the teachers, then they just exited you at that point.
I
My
kinda
dad
like that system.
yeah, my dad taught tech drawing and metalwork, and he said he kept a list of boys' birthdays, and the ones who were giving him a lot of trouble, and were just obviously too big to be at school
Yeah.
and too surly. He would find apprenticeships for and get them out the door. Uh,
That's
so there
great.
was a point, yeah. Then there was another point, which was so my last year of school, I had to go to a different school. I just couldn't face going back to the same one that I'd been at because I just had crashed there. So I went to a new school and I spent 1 year there and I got what we called university entrance, which was the exam that you would pass to go to a public university. There were no private ones, and the public ones had a fairly high standard, like only, I think, a quarter of the school kids could actually pass the exam to get in
Wow.
to the university. And then the university itself didn't have any like fluff courses. Like if you took university Spanish, that meant that you had already taken Spanish for 4 years and had proved yourself very competent in it.
Mm.
Like you
Okay.
couldn't it's different from the American system where you can go to university and take something that you've never done before. Like you
Hmm.
are going there to get excellent at something, and there's no PE courses or there's no electives or anything like that. You jump straight in. So if you're going to do math, you will do high level math from day one, kind
Wow.
of thing. So I did pass my university entrance. And then there's one more you could do, which was kind of a prep year if you wanted to.
Mhm.
But I was done with school. So I elected to go straight to university at 17. It went well for a couple of years. And then again, I crashed, which
Mm.
I was at Waikato University. I am dyslexic. And I remember my first year, I did an English paper. And there's the guy who was the professor of English. My first paper that I sent in, on choice or something, I think. I got a D for it. And you know how you can write with a pencil and then erase it, but you can still read what the pencil said?
Mm-hmm.
So he had done that on my paper.
Oh,
And he had obviously written a comment and then had second thoughts. But the comment that he erased was, "How did you get here?"
oh wow.
Which was a bit traumatic. And I began to wonder, well, how did I get here? And as again, it comes back to me just being very uneven. I'm very good at concepts, for the most part, very poor at details. And,
Okay.
you know, so yeah, that was a bit discouraging. So I think I did 2 years at university. And then I transferred next door to was called the Hamilton Training College, and I did 2 years there, and that was where you trained to be a teacher, which was affiliated with the university, but not the university. And I
Okay.
did 2 years there and graduated.
So that sounds like you really did have a journey just getting through your education
Right.
yourself. How did that impact you as a teacher? Your experiences?
Well, my experiences, I think it made me very individual, able to deal with kids individually and to respect that kids are not even. And,
Yeah.
I think I was a very good teacher. I simultaneously really enjoyed it and burned out.
Mm,
And after 2 years, again, I crashed and I couldn't face it anymore. I felt very lonely in the classroom
mm,
because it was me in a room with 20 little kids, which I
yeah.
love little kids. But, when something happened, I wanted to talk to someone about it. I was at a very small school. There were only 4 classrooms. It
Mm,
was a tiny country school. And the other teachers were all a bit jaded.
yeah. That
not,
was not
not
helpful.
No, it wasn't really. So yeah, it's just kind of that kind of as I say, my childhood and up to the time I was married by then. I got married at 20. Yeah, and it was looking from the outside, you mightn't see the pattern so much, but certainly for me, I had learned to be very guarded about my creativity because it came with expectations that I just bombed on every
Yeah.
time. And it led to a lot of people expressing, older people in my lives, my teachers, my parents, expressing profound disappointment in me that I could never live up to my expectations. Because I
Mm,
think with kids, you can look at 10 things a kid does. And, as a parent or teacher, you might pick out the top one and then say, well, that's what they're capable of. But actually, they were capable of it that day in those circumstances.
right.
And to hold that up then as something that the kid can do all day, every day is cruel
Yeah.
sometimes, particularly if you really do have some learning differences. And I feel like pretty much I just was very disappointing to people in my academic journey.
Mm. Well, outside of academics, it sounds like you found some good things. You got married. So tell us
I
a
did.
little bit about falling in love and finding your person and how that happened.
Okay, well, I met my husband, Geoff, when I was 19, and he was a friend of my brother's, and my brother had come home for his 25th birthday and brought Geoff with him. And we just clicked immediately. I mean, you wouldn't even imagine this now, but my mother wasn't really a very capable person, and I had to do a vast majority of the housework for the 6 of us from the time I was about 10. So one of my jobs was the ironing, and it would literally be a couch piled to the top with ironing. So when Geoff came one night, I was doing the ironing, and I swear I ironed everything in the house twice. And it was like 4 in the morning because we were just talking and we just got along so well. And I think that Geoff had not done well at school either. He had done
Mhm.
worse than me because he didn't give a rip. At
Yeah.
least I was trying, but he had just veered off into enjoyment. And actually, when he sat his exams the second year, he sat the same exams. He actually got less the second year than the first year. I don't even know how you do that. So he had flunked school and just sort of had a bunch of menial jobs, but I could see that he was incredibly intelligent, but just he has no motivation to demonstrate that to anybody.
Yeah.
So, so it wasn't easy when we decided to get married. My family were not pro, that's for
Mhm.
sure. My dad was a teacher, and here's someone who couldn't even, finish fifth form effectively. But we had these circumstances. He was an orderly at the hospital when we married, and he was 24, and
Mhm.
he got very ill with salmonella and was put off indefinitely because it's communicable disease. You can't work in a hospital with salmonella, and
Right.
it wouldn't clear his system. And the day he
Wow.
was told he couldn't go back to his job was the day that university enrollment closed. And in New Zealand, even though you had to pass all these exams to get into university, if you were over 21, they gave you 1 year's grace. So if you were 21 or older, you could go for 1 year. And
Mm.
if you succeeded, you could stay. And if you failed, you were done. Yeah, that's kind of so he went and he just thrived. He did history and geography and philosophy, and he thrived. So I think we really supported each other because I always saw, the intelligence in him and the potential in him. And I think he saw it in me as well.
Mm.
And so I actually don't know where I would be if we hadn't found each other because, you need somebody who is not going to judge you and not going to tell you that you can do better and all of those things that you're trying to do anyway.
Right. Right. So you all got married in New Zealand,
Hmm.
met there, and then what started your family? Like, when did your family get going? And, what were your.
Well, yes. Well, when I was 14, I had my youngest brother, and I was kind of really very much a second mom to him.
Mhm.
He lived in my room, and I attended him in the night and things like that when I was at school. So I was very attached to him, but I could also see how much work kids were.
Oh,
I
yeah.
wasn't under any illusions, and because of that, I wasn't thinking that I must have kids now kind of thing when we got
Mhm.
married. Which most of my friends, when they got married, they had kids straight away. But
Yeah.
I could see you could wait and still it would still be all right when you got there. So I
Mhm.
had our oldest daughter when I was 24,
Okay.
and then we joined YWAM about 6 months later, and we did a DTS, and then we went on the Anastasis, which was the first Mercy ship,
So
and
let's
we.
let's back up there for just a second, because
Mhm.
we have, I'm sure, people who are listening that don't know some of the background with YWAM. So your first child was pretty young when
Yes.
you joined
Yeah.
YWAM. What
6 months.
made you what made you make that decision? Like, what pushed you into YWAM? And that stands for Youth with a Mission
Uh-huh.
for those people. So tell us a little bit
Well,
about that.
we're both Christians, and the Anastasis, which was a large ship that was going to be doing Christian mercy work, mainly hospital work,
Mm.
came through New Zealand, and we went to visit it, and we just really felt like was our next step. So by that time we had been at a large convention centre, New Zealand Convention Centre for 2 years.
Mhm.
And my husband had been the head chef. It's a long story, but that's how it went. And and so they needed cooks on the ship. So we went to a tiny little place called Pahi in New Zealand, and we did our DTS there with about 10 other families. And then we joined the Anastasis in Honolulu.
And we'll be right back. What if this summer did more than just fill your team's time? What if it played a foundational role in who they're becoming? At Excel Summer Leadership Camp, students step into a transformational adventure experience designed to help them discover their calling, discern what truly matters, and learn how to live it out with wisdom and courage. Through outdoor adventure like camping, whitewater rafting, and rock climbing, intentional community and Christ centered mentorship, Excel Summer Leadership Camp equips young adults to grow in their leadership, their character, and their faith. Right now, you can get $100 off your next camp session with code FPEA 2026. Learn more and apply today at theexcelcamp.org. And now, back to the show. That's amazing. So can you tell me a little bit about how that time was spent when you were on the ship? How many years were you there?
We were only there for about 9 months. It was sort of like disastrous
With a
to
small
be
child
honest.
and everything? Yeah, that would
Well,
be.
that was okay. We had to raise our own money, which is very not cultural for a New Zealander, and certainly not a style that Geoff and I fall easily into,
Mm-hmm.
asking for money and stuff. So we'd sort of cobbled some stuff together. And then the day we got to the ship in Honolulu was the day that they announced that the ship had been stopped by the Coast Guard. It was okay. Its sprinkler system was okay outside of US waters, but within US waters, it did not meet the criteria because it had been designated it was all about the designation. Anyway, in the US, it was a designated passenger ship, even though everyone on board was staff. And so the sprinkler system, either they had to permanently leave US waters or they had to upgrade the sprinkler system, which meant pulling down all the bulkheads. I mean, it was a 2-year job.
Wow.
So they had decided to stay and do that. So the day we arrived, we had to start telling our supporters, actually, we're not going anywhere. We're stuck in Honolulu Harbor. And, and you get, oh, you're on a cruise. Ooh, lucky you. And so Shannon's eldest daughter was a year old. She had her first birthday on the aft deck. And then we went off. I was teaching the kids in another DTS, and we went off to the Philippines with them. And we decided to stay in the Philippines because it was really not much to do. When I was on the ship, I was in the laundry department, which I actually quite liked. I still like laundry. It's very, like we had these giant laundry machines, washing machines that were like 8 foot long, big barrel things.
Wow.
And big with hinges, you'd hinge them and levers and steam coming out, and you had to try to keep everything moving, and we had to do every individual person's laundry on the ship, and also the kitchen laundry and the engineer's laundry and all of that. So we were like, it was just a giant logistics thing. So it was more fun to me than it might sound. But anyway, we went to the Philippines, and when we were there, we adopted a 7-year-old street kid, a boy. So we adopted him. And I suppose I should tell you how we got into writing.
Yeah.
Okay.
This was a part of your YWAM experience, right?
Right, it was.
Yeah.
So I had always loved to read, but I had obviously very mixed success with writing, and it wasn't something I really did. Like I tried to journal every so often, but never got past, January 5th. And
I understand.
Yeah, pretty much. And so we went up to the hills. We were sent up there. Geoff was going to rearrange some of the kitchen and things. And we were on the 5th floor of this hotel in a place called Antipolo Rizal. And it sounds really good, except that the hotel had very little electricity and no running water. So here we are on the 5th floor with 2 little kids, flushing toilet, but nothing to flush it with. So no elevators, of course. So we were super fit. We did a lot of walking up and down. A lot of water rationing too. I wouldn't say we had deep baths. The first day I was there, I remember I opened the curtains and I looked out, and all the way down the hill, there was just this line of people. And it was like 7 a.m. I'm like, what on earth are we doing here today? What? So I went downstairs and I said, hey, what's going on today? Must be something big. And they're like, no, nothing's going on. I'm like, well, what are all these people doing lined up? And someone said, oh, they're here on Tuesday morning at 9:00. We open the doors and we give everybody in line 2 pieces of used clothing. And I had come from a very middle-class country. New Zealand was socialized, still is, and it's very middle class. I had never seen a hungry person that I know of, and certainly no one begging or anything like that. And I was just, I was absolutely shocked that there were people in the world who would line up probably since 4 or 5 in the morning for, a used pair of flip-flops and an old T-shirt. I was like, oh my goodness. And I was very naive back then. So I thought, well, if I write to our supporters and let them know what I'm seeing here, they'll help. So I started, kind of writing about what I saw, and other people at the base, as we called it, at the hotel, saw my newsletter and started asking if they could use it as well. So just kind of started sharing our newsletter around. And then a long story, which is very dramatic, but we ended up leaving at gunpoint. And we all had to scatter and find somewhere. And the director of the Philippines came to us and he said, I hear you guys are writers. And that was the first time anyone had ever called us a writer. And we're like, oh, I wouldn't say that. And he said, well, we're starting a national newsletter, and would you guys come and start it for us? And we were like, well, if you're sure that's what you want, because we had nowhere else to go. We all had to scatter. There's probably 70, 80 people had to find somewhere to live, like overnight. So we went down to Manila and we started the newsletter, and we just tried to go out and tell stories about what we saw, which was kind of new for newsletters back then. And it was very, very successful. So as a result of that, we started to kind of see ourselves a little more as writers, more like realistic. And then Jan Rogers called. She was Lauren Cunningham, who was the founder of YWAM's sister. And she called from Texas. And she said, hey, we've got this writing school coming up in Texas. We want you guys to come. And it's going to be, the first one. And John and Elizabeth Sherrill, who, they wrote The Cross and the Switchblade and The Hiding Place and all those classics. They said they were going to be teaching at it. And they said, we want you to come. And we were like, you know what? We can't even afford to literally buy a donut. I mean, we were, getting skinnier by the day. And yes. And we actually found it quite funny because we had no money. And she called up 3 times, and each time we were like, well, it sounds great, but, we just can't do it. And then from New Zealand, an older couple who had been in the church with us, out of nowhere, sent us a check. And sorry,
that's okay.
It's always
it's an emotional, pivotal point, right?
Yeah. They had a farm in New Zealand, and they had sold their farm, and they had tithed the sale of the farm to us.
Wow.
So we went from having literally not enough money to buy soap powder to enough money for us all to go to America and pay for this course. And
that's incredible.
It was. I mean, it's still 40 years later. It's still like, oof, what a moment. So we went. There's a lot more to the story, but we'll just say we went, and we had to leave our son behind, which was he was legally adopted, but the government said they wanted to undo the adoption for various reasons because his mother had showed up and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, we did go, and we did the writing school. And when the writing school was over, we got a letter saying that they apologized, that his mother didn't want him after all, and that we could come and get him again. So I was 9 months pregnant with my second daughter, and Geoff went back and got him from the Philippines. And that's how we have 3 children.
Oh, that's amazing.
So I had not intended to attend the school because I was going to have a son, and I was going to help him with his English and adjusting and everything.
Yeah.
And because he wasn't there, I didn't really have much to do because our 2-year-old was pretty easy, and she was looking forward to preschool and things. So I did the writers' school, and I just loved it, and I understood what they were saying, and I particularly Elizabeth Sherrill, she really dissected part of The Hiding Place, one of the chapters, and she had a sound reason why basically every sentence was in there. And
Mm.
and what she was trying to say, what she was leaving out, what she was trying to evoke in the reader. And I must say, I had read hundreds and hundreds of books, but I had never understood that books had techniques
Mm.
that a writer could employ. I honestly thought that it just sort of downloaded and it came
Mm-hmm.
out their fingers. And when I spent, 6 months studying techniques and reasons and logic, and I was like, "Oh my goodness, this is amazing. I can do this."
Yeah.
If, now that I know it's something you can do and not something that just happens to you, I
Mm-hmm.
was like, "I can do this." And so before the school was over, we had one of our leaders, Floyd McClung, came
Mm-hmm.
through, and he was a very lovely, gracious man. He's passed away now, but he was 6'6", and I'm 5'4", and I was 9 months pregnant. And because I hadn't had a project when I came to the school, Jan Rogers just pulled this old manuscript that he had sent her a long time ago off the shelf and said, "Here, work on this." So Floyd happened to come by the school, and Jan said that I was working on his book. He didn't even know that I was. Like, he hadn't given permission or anything. And he said, "Oh, well, let's go for a walk." So I remember we were walking along, this East Texas road, and I'm looking right up at him because he's like a foot taller than me. And there's a big bump in front. And he's like, "Well, tell me what you would do to it."
Hmm.
And I was like, "Don't ask me twice what I think." So I just was like, and then I would blah, 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 blah. And I think it's too much this way, blah, 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 blah. And I'd add this, blah, 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 blah. And he just had this lovely smile on his face. And when I was finished, he said to me, "Okay, do it." And I
Hmm.
was like, "What?" And he's like, "Just go ahead and do everything you said you were going to do to that book."
That's great.
And I said, "Okay." So I did, and I sent it to him, and he liked it, and it got published. And he gave us, we did, I don't know, 5, 10 more books with him after that.
That's great.
And because he had a high profile, and because he had, trusted us and put our names on the cover and things, I think people just assumed that we had had a big background in writing and we knew what we were doing. And from that day on, which was 1986, we have never been without a commercial job.
Mm.
It was really amazing.
That's phenomenal. Can you tell
It's a
me,
crazy story.
it's a crazy story. What prompted you to move in the direction of the biographies?
Well, we did ghostwriting for about 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
And ghostwriting is incredibly stressful. I mean, I think it has a short career life because you have to work with people who think they know what they're talking about, and they do, but they don't know how to write it. But maybe
Mm-hmm.
they've already got a message, maybe they're already very well known. And so you kind of there's a lot of psychology involved in trying to help people move in your direction while making them think that's their choice.
Mm.
So in a way, the better job you do at ghostwriting, the less you'll be recognized by the
Yeah.
people then
Yeah.
nobody says, "Oh, I was doing just this absolute awful job and Janet came and rescued me." No,
Mm-hmm.
that's not how it works normally. So after about 10 years of that, we were sort of pretty burned out. And a publisher in Texas came to us and asked us if we'd write children's stories and children's biographies, which were, I think, about 1,200 words. And we wrote a couple of them for them, and I just loved it.
Mm-hmm.
I loved, learning about the person. And I will say, I think what helps overall with our books is we were not born and raised in the United States. We are
Mm-hmm.
American citizens, but we didn't get kind of inoculated against American history like a lot of Americans are. It was genuinely fascinating for us to read about Thanksgiving, whereas
Right.
when you saw our kids go through the system, they're doing it, from the time they're 5, they're dressing up in their little pilgrim outfits and making pies. And, by the time they're 10, they think they're over it.
Yes.
But we didn't we kind of dove in. We did more because we had done more English history. So
Mm.
yeah, so it was all just very interesting, and we were able to kind of find fresh ways to look at it.
Right.
And then YWAM came to us, and they had said that their youth with a mission, and people kept coming to the booth and saying, "Hey, where are your books on missionaries for young people?" And they were
Mhm.
like, "Well, we don't have any." And there really weren't a lot. There wasn't a standard series. There was a couple of series, but they were all different authors from all different time periods, and they were very hit and miss. Like, you'd get a
Yeah.
good one, get all inspired, and then you'd read one that was literally 80 years old. They just put a new cover on. And so they came up with the idea of, like, let's start a series where it's the same people write them all. They'll all be the same style, and they will showcase missionaries as they should be, which is some of these stories are absolutely amazing.
They are.
And
Yeah.
and yet by the time you'd finished reading the older versions, you could hardly get through them for yawning. And
Mm.
as we were reading it, we're like, how can this be? This is insane what these people have gone through.
Yeah.
So we wrote the first 4 books, and just as a kind of a trial.
Mhm.
And then they went really well. So we kept going. We got up to 82 books. I think they're in like now 22 languages. And I know there's, I don't know, 10, 11 million plus books. I'm not sure how many, but yeah, a lot of
It's
books.
incredible. A lot of
It
books.
is. It's crazy.
And they really took off with, I guess, YWAM, but also, like I said, we have 2 younger children who have grown up homeschooling from the very beginning. And so 2 of our 5 did it from the beginning. And there wasn't a place that you could go where we didn't see people carrying the books. And
Yeah.
I can remember the first time we were at a park day or something, and several people had it, and I was like, what are those? You
What
know?
cult do you
Yes.
belong
What
to?
is this? And so once we found out, I mean, and then it became a thing. We would go to the convention, and one of the first is, how many YWAM books can we afford to get? And which
Hmm.
ones are they going to be? Which ones are the
Hmm.
kids going to get? So, I mean, it really just, taught so much history, but I think just making people and their stories become very real to kids, especially
Hmm.
for like our children growing up. And, I can remember thinking when I was younger, I loved hearing stories about people. Your backstory, this is amazing to me. I could sit and do this all day, but I couldn't stand to read books
Hmm.
about people and their stories. Sometimes it seemed like it would get very dull or very,
Yeah.
just it wasn't something tangible that you felt
You have
like
to
you could
plod
become a
through
part
and
of. Yeah.
mhm,
And so biographies were like low on my list of
mhm.
things. And I can remember thinking, how am I going to get my kids to do this? But we would travel a lot, and we would take books with us and read them together. And it was a part of our read aloud time together in our home, always the YWAM books. So your name and your husband's name were just like regular. You would see them in our house all the time. And I think that that's the thing that's incredible, is you've been able to tell the stories of other people in such a way, that it makes what they did and what their lives were, and the importance of the things that they did very real to children and youth. And I mean, even parents, like every parent I know that didn't read 1,000 biographies when they were young, that read all of these as they were homeschooling their kids. I mean, you're learning too, you're loving the
Mhm.
stories. I can remember one of them that really got me one time. I don't even know why so much, but I was reading with my kids about Billy Graham, and some of his story just really hit me, and I was just like,
Mhm.
this is crazy. And, I would get so caught up in the story itself myself, so
Mhm.
I can't say enough for the literature itself and for the world that it opens up to your family, as you're reading and sharing these
Mhm.
biographies together. But what an incredible experience for you and your husband to just have the opportunity to make those stories real for
Mhm.
people and to share those stories,
Yeah. We kind
So,
of feel like we're ambassadors, like time traveling ambassadors. Like, if
mhm,
you had met those people in their time, they were fascinating.
yeah.
And somehow the books that we were presented with made them boring. And
Mm,
so we kind of see our role as like to reinvigorate them to what they really were, which was crazy, interesting, faithful, brave, insanely brave
Yeah.
people. I mean, you get Mary Slessor, she's got her little knitting and she's literally sitting at a palaver with two warring tribes who would just as happily kill her as each other. And she's just knitting there and she's the government representative trying to end this dispute because they can't find a single man who will go back
He'll
there.
do it.
And
Yeah.
she's this little Scottish lady with no education. She's like, "Oh, I'll sort them out." And she does. And you're like, how is that not mind blowing?
I think
But one
that
of the things, sorry.
oh no, I think that that's what it is. Like you miss those things,
Hmm.
and so much of the overwhelming details of biographies that you see out there that will be old and big and boring, and you take these books that are written for a younger,
Hmm.
reader to be able to understand. And even as the mom, even as the dad, you're getting so much out of it.
Yeah, I think one of the things my husband gets when I say their biographies, he bristles because he has, a history and philosophy degree. And he's like, they're not biographies, they're stories because we're writing to a younger audience. So we give
Yeah.
ourselves permission to really skip the boring parts.
Hmm.
Like if something is going to be not sort of changed, if it's from age 60 to 70 and they're doing the same thing, we could do that in 3 sentences. Like
Hmm.
a proper adult biography of the person would require you to plod through
Yes.
those 10 years. But and I think it is my ADHD is a real gift here because I get bored at about the same rate as a 12-year-old boy.
Hmm.
I just do. It's just a fact.
It's
Like
incredible.
I have a real visceral sense of when we have to move on. And
Hmm.
even though I really love research and I love rabbit holes and I could go on about minutia forever when I'm actually doing a book, I do have a sense of when it's time to go. And
Yeah.
I think that's a huge part of the success of the books is that they are attuned to kids' attention spans and pay
Yeah.
or weight to the things that kids find interesting.
And I think also there's two things about the books. One is it opens your eyes up to these people's lives and how people with different stories can impact other people's lives in ways that you wouldn't have thought of. I mean,
Mhm.
how God has used something particular about them, even if it was
Mhm.
their willingness to just do something somebody else wouldn't do. The
Right.
things that, so it opens your eyes up to that and encourages you that there's a lot of places that you can fit into life.
Yes.
There's not just one.
Right.
And I say that growing up thinking as a teenage girl, I can be a nurse, I can be a teacher, I
Mhm.
can be, there's certain
A mother,
boxes,
a
yeah.
secretary.
You don't think about all of the things that are
Mhm.
there, but when you read these stories, you do. The second thing is, and it was my experience, is that it would be the jumping off place because once my child found something interesting about this person that was very encouraging, then we had more, then we could go find more books about this
Mhm.
person. We could find more ways to research.
Mhm.
But it wasn't spent, every single one didn't make you just dread reading it and getting to the stories because they were so manageable for the kids. And I think
Right.
that, I would say that they were the jumping off point for much of the learning of my kids because my kids love history. They love biography. They love to learn about people. They're much like I am, but they would not mind, they had their own struggles with reading along the way. They would not have read some of the books that would have been placed before them, except
Mhm.
for the fact that they already knew the story, right? So
Right.
once they knew about these people and what they did, then it was even more encouraging to them to just pick up another book and read more. So I
Right.
think that that is the treasure of those books to me. You're getting what you're going to get in a very manageable form that's gonna bring you encouragement, tell you the story, introduce you to things that you wouldn't have been introduced to. But then it's a great jumping off place for somebody that wants to just go deeper,
Mhm.
as well.
We yeah, we have met personally, I would say 5 kids who have their pilot's licenses now because they
Mm,
read Nate Saint.
of course. Yeah.
And I have met many families that have adopted children as a result of reading Amy Carmichael and
Hmm.
George Mueller. And I mean that, and the only conference we really go to for the most part is the Florida one. So we're
Yeah.
not kind of out circulating, but there must be a lot of people out there who have been influenced to make some fairly important life decisions based on what they've read in the books,
Yeah.
which.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that just it never ceases to amaze me about the books is the range of ages and types of people that they speak to. I mean,
Hmm.
I'll get a fan letter from an 8-year-old Amish girl in Ohio, and she's loving this book. And then honestly, they go into federal prisons, and we will get another letter from about the same book from somebody who's on death row, and it's
Right.
like it it's doesn't really compute. I mean, how does this work that an 8-year-old sheltered Amish girl and a dude who's murdered somebody or something,
Hmm.
that they are writing and saying the same thing about the same book? I mean, that's just
It's
nuts.
incredible, but it's the power of a person's life and the power of a
It is.
story. And that is something that, like I said, when we're looking at it from a pure literary standpoint, think of the numbers of books that we've looked at that were boring, and their lives are
Mhm.
not boring,
They are
and
not.
they're not without impacts. They're not without importance.
Mhm.
And to cross that barrier, it does touch lives. It doesn't matter if it is a small child or an adult that's had a jaded life, you're going
Mhm.
to find impact in the story. And I think that
Mm.
that's the incredible thing about the books. So, I appreciate them for sure. I know a lot of people who have appreciated them. And so I thank you for sharing your story, because I know that there's a lot more stories and rabbit holes we could have gone down. And maybe we will another time. But
Yeah, just never know.
just for people to have an opportunity to hear, a little bit about where these incredible stories originated and your lives leading to that. And just like, we talk about here so many of the times that we hear a story, it's never the path that we anticipated we would have ended up
Right.
on. Right. And that's where our name comes from, not by the book, but, it's the way that we make ourselves available, I think, to the opportunities that God puts in front of us. And
Mhm.
and when we say yes, the things that he'll do and the
Mhm.
ways that he will use us can be amazing, and much more than we ever could have dreamed or calculated on our own to manage
Absolutely.
to do. But before we wrap up, I just wanted to ask, is there anything that you would share as a word of encouragement or a quote that you've lived with, a verse of scripture that's really meant a lot to you, that's encouraged you through all of the twists and turns of your journey?
Well, yes, I've had a lot, and I've had a lot of times where I couldn't really see the way forward, particularly when I was younger, and times of despair. And I think the verse from Jeremiah, "For I know the plans I have for you, to give you a
Mm.
future and hope." I remember writing those up on my wall, defacing my wallpaper, which didn't make my family happy. But I think, yeah, sometimes I didn't have a lot of hope or a lot of in the future. I couldn't see a way through, and that verse was something that I clung to. So yeah.
That's great. I love that verse. Well, thank you so much for sharing with us again and for being here with us today. And I just can't wait for people to have a chance to maybe meet you in the coming months at FPEA. So we'll have an
Yes,
opportunity
we
to connect there as well.
right. We are just putting our website up again. We had it hacked during COVID, and we kind of gave up on it for a while. But you can connect with us through our website. Will be up this week, so
It's
it's very exciting.
fantastic.
It's justbengebooks.com, so very
Okay.
easy. Yeah,
That's
so if
great.
people want to hear more of our story or whatever, we pleased to hear from you.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you, Suzanne.
All
I've really
right.
enjoyed it. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks for listening to the Not by the Book podcast from the Florida Parent Educators Association. To learn more about homeschooling in Florida or to find resources to help you on this amazing journey, visit our website at FPEA.com. If you have any suggestions for future guests, contact me, Suzanne, at notbythebook@fpea.com. Thanks again for listening, and be inspired to live your life not by the book.